Coming to you from the M&M Exterior Studio in Nooksville, Virginia, this is Flushing It Out with Samantha Spittle, the introvert's extrovert. She talks to people so you don't have to. For now.
Well, Denise, thank you so much for flushing it out with me today on the podcast. I'm excited for everyone to learn about you, your story, and of course, Storybook Treasures. So Denise, why don't you introduce yourself to everybody?
Sure. So I'm Denise Corbo, and I'm president and founder of Storybook Treasures. And Storybook Treasures is a nonprofit with the mission of putting books into the hearts, hands, and homes of children in need.
That's awesome. And now you are a former school teacher. And so you have a passion for kids and, not only just having them read, but have a love of reading. So take me back, where did your story start with kind of this being your passion? I guess you could almost call it your second act because you've been a teacher for so long and now you are saying goodbye to the in-classroom teaching and now taking it could be, international, who knows? So
yeah, I think it's neat that you call it the second act because that's truly how I feel. This is it really is like a second act. So I've been an educator for over 30 years. Education found me. It wasn't something that I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to go into education. I'm going to be an amazing teacher. In fact, I was a horrible student, and school was really hard for me. I was raised in a military family, and we moved all around the world. And my mother is from Austria. So she is an English language learner. This is her second language. And so school was really hard for me. So a lot of children who have, the great support that families typically provide. Not that my family didn't provide support. I think they just didn't know how to support us. And so it was hard for me. And so when I decided, I actually took cosmetology in high school. So vocational education, my mother was a hairdresser. I decided I wanted to take vocational education, and the counselor said, no. You need to go to college. These kids aren't going to college, and you need to go to college. And I said, well, my mom is a hairdresser. I really would like to do this. And so my mom had to come in and sign a waiver to allow me to take cosmetology vocational education, knowing that I wouldn't be getting some of those preparatory classes that you typically get in college. And so I did that. And then I would say probably my junior year, I was like, I think I want to go to college. and all my friends were talking about college. And I'm like, oh, I'd like to go to college too. So I went back to my counselor and I said, I think I want to go to college. And they were like, oh my goodness. And so I had to take some extra classes during the summertime and also during my break. I had a break during a travel break because I had to go to a different school for the vocational education, and I squeezed in an extra science class, and then I was accepted into college, and I ended up graduating college in just 2.5 years. I was just so intent on kind of getting it done so that I could move on to the next chapter of my life. And again, education was not it. I had an undergraduate degree, emphasis in business psychology.
I feel like we find ourselves often in someone else's story. And even if it's different than our own, I feel like there's things like aha moments. So I heard a couple things in there that it's like, you were willing to change, like in high school, I feel like there's so much pressure put on kids of, you have to figure it out. Just think, we talk to little kids of, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's like, and as a high schooler, I feel like bravo for you for trying out cosmetology school and doing that and then deciding to go to college. Like, as you're talking, I'm just like, wow. So often I feel like the story I've heard and I've talked through on the podcast many times, because I'm sure I lived it too, is that you just get on the track. Like, well, for me, I feel, like going to college, that's just what we did. I never even thought twice about it. And it's just, you get on that train and you keep moving. And so to me, I'm like, wow, that's so cool that you were willing to try different things, hustle to get it done, And then to me, it just also ties into everything that you were, teaching for 30 years. And now suddenly it's like, let me start a nonprofit it's like, you still have so much more life, to live and to grow and all this stuff, but it's so easy for us if we don't get on that train. It's like with college. If some people think if they didn't go at 18, what's the point? We missed the road. And so being willing to start this thing now, I'm not surprised hearing that you were willing to try different paths way back in high school. So I think that's really cool.
And I say, I have a plan, but God always seems to have a bigger plan.
Exactly.
And I think you just have to go with it. And that's just part of life and experience and where you're meant to be. I've had many doors close and when that door closes, it's like, okay, so what now? What are we going to do now? And typically it's because something bigger is waiting. And you just don't know it, at the time. So, at the time it just seemed, school was hard. Cosmetology seemed to be something great. My mom, I had already an interest in it. I knew a lot about it, through my mom. And it was very successful for me. So when I took cosmetology, I was really top of the class. I won all the, great awards, and my cosmetology teacher was incredible. She really saw in all of us what we couldn't see in ourselves, and just pushed us. And she was part of the reason too, why I was willing to consider college. She would talk about that. And then of course, when I went home and told my mom, I'm thinking about college, she's like, oh yes. Education's a big deal to her. So,
and how cool too, to remind parents that one of my past guests, Dawn Geshier, she talked about having a healthy detachment from the outcome of our kids, because we get so wrapped up as parents, of wanting them to like make the good choices. And it, becomes a reflection of us and worry. And if we need to control them, and it's like needing to have, as they get older, having that healthy detachment. And so it's funny how you had that. It sounds like you had that freedom to explore, but trusting that you had the mentors in your life that helped guide you to the path that you were meant to go on. So.
Yeah. And I think, with my mom, she has always been my number one cheerleader. So, whatever I wanted to do or want to do, she was always behind me. Yeah, let's try it out. Let's do it. And what do we need to do? And how much is it going to cost? And so, when I went from, I started out I was accepted into Ferrum College under academic probation because I had not had the college courses that I needed to have. And then when I started looking at other colleges closer to home, I looked at Marymount University, and I did a little sales pitch to my mom. And then I said, it's a private school. It's going to cost a little bit more, but I'm going to finish in 2.5 years. And then you won't have to take care of me anymore. I'll be independent. And so it was, I'll never forget, I sat down. They own a restaurant. And so I went to the restaurant, we sat in a booth, I had it all written out for her. And I'm like, look, I'm going to take all of these classes. It's going to cost you a lot of money up front, but in the long run, I'm going to be independent, in this 2 years, and you won't have to support me anymore. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. And she was like, okay, if you can do it. And then I went back to the university and showed them my schedule. And they're like, no. You cannot take 24 credit hours in the summer. And I said, well, I think I can. It fits into my schedule. And so they were very reluctantly signed off for me to do it. And I did it. And then, who knew? And then I went on, as I finished that degree, I received a phone call from a public school asking, actually my mother received the phone call because she's a hairdresser as well. And she has a teaching certificate. So they called and they said, we're in desperate need of a cosmetology teacher. Would you be interested? And she said, no, but my daughter would be interested. And so she set up the interview for me. And so when I came home, she's like, I set up an interview for you to be a cosmetology teacher. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, I was a terrible student. I could never be a teacher. And she's like, no, you have to go. I've already set up this interview. You have to go. When your mom tells you, you have to do something, you have to do it. And so I went to that interview thinking, I was just going to do this for my mom. And when I walked into that cosmetology lab and I saw kids that were disengaged and kind of lost, I mean, it just looked like that, so much potential there, but nothing going on. And it just spoke to me. And I looked around and I think the wheels started turning. And then of course I had administrators that were very desperate to get somebody in there that was licensed. And I had taken my teaching license when I was in college. Again, my mother saying to me, hey, this is going to look great on your resume. All you have to do is take this test. It's a 100-question test. And if you pass it, then you can have a cosmetology teaching certificate. I'm like, okay, I'll do it. So they pretty much were very desperate. And because just the state of what I saw just spoke to me. And again, a God thing, I think that things get put into your heart for a reason. And I went ahead and I left that interview with a teaching contract.
Wow. That is amazing. Mm-hmm. That is so, when you were talking about walking in and seeing the students and seeing the potential, what came to mind is that the gift you were given as a teenager to have, people see the potential in you and help get you on a path. I feel like that was reborn, and it's like the gifts were given, we are then able to pour out later in our life. And it just sounds so full circle for that. Mm-hmm. I get to do that.
Yeah. And I feel that is truly is what has made me a great teacher, is because I did struggle. Exactly. Because I did, I knew the feeling of what it felt like when you just didn't know and didn't have a place to figure it out and didn't have that support. Although I had a lot of support, I think as far as, giving me direction, but as far as like understanding content, that was just a real struggle for me. I felt like I didn't have, maybe I wasn't as strong of a reader, and I definitely wasn't confident. I was very insecure and shy. And even to this day, I have moments where I just struggle with the words, or struggle with what I want to say, or getting my idea out there in a way that's clear and concise. I think that, but that's all learning, and also just knowing that, allowing myself not to be perfect all the time. And
I was going to say, how do you, I think that those feelings of insecurity and imperfection, it's so universal, but you obviously have continued to push through. Like I said, it starts with the changes, I feel like, back when you were in high school. And then, you have this now 30 years of teaching, starting this new nonprofit. How do you keep overcoming and pushing through to keep doing these big things?
I think, I am I'm a perfectionist, and in a lot of ways. And I feel like that what I've had to do is just forgive myself and just know that, hey, it's okay. We all make mistakes. Yes, I could have done it better. I could have said it better. I wish I could go back. But a lot of it is, you have to just get to the point where it is what it is. And maybe it wasn't my best day, but it was pretty good. And how can we go back and change it if it didn't work out? And just having that growth mindset where this didn't work out, and how we're going to change it so that it does work out. So that's kind of just what I do, I think, just by nature, and not that I don't have moments where I feel defeated and I'm down and I'm like, you say a little prayer and hope that tomorrow is better. So I ended up teaching cosmetology then for about 5 years. And then when you look at the teaching scale, you see that the only way to make more money is to get more education. and so I'm like, well, I think I'll get my master's degree. So I went to, I went back to Marymount, got my master's degree, and in kindergarten through 8th grade, and they required me to do student teaching. And so I'm like, what? I'm already teaching. I have to resign my teaching contract in order to do student teaching. And so And I tried to fight that, but in hindsight, I'm so glad, that I went through the experience, because teaching is not the same, teaching vocational education, teaching elementary school, two different things. So I started teaching, and actually when I did my student teaching, and I was offered a job, and the principal there said, I would like to give you first grade. I'm like, first grade? I can't do first grade. I got to high school. Surely, you put me in a, like fifth grade or fourth grade. And he said, no, he goes, I see the way that you work. I see how you interact with kids. And I see I've heard, you talk about your philosophy, and I think you would be perfect for first grade. And so he gave me the keys, and he said, Denise, teach him how to read and write. Everything else will come. And so I'm like, okay. So there I sat, with the key to my classroom, and the first day of school with all these little kids looking up at me, these big bright eyes, all excited and going, oh my gosh, what have I done? And, and just, you just learn from there. And yeah, it's been an incredible journey.
What I love about your story, because it just came back around once again, is that once again, someone else saw the potential in you, and you went in a direction that you didn't necessarily want to go in. And that I heard you talk, you have that internal drive. So it's like trusting yourself to know, like, you have the plan, you have the, like kind of you're in control of your own stuff that you can be in control of to, get the education, be determined, be focused, but then allowing the people who can say, you know what, I see something in you that you might not see in yourself, and to allow it to ebb and flow. So I just think that's really, really neat.
And I've never thought of it that way. And I think you're right. I think that throughout my whole life, I think that's really has guided me in a lot of ways, with others coming in and going, hey, I think this might be great for you. What do you think? Yeah.
I think we're called to be in community. I feel like with my faith, trusting, like, I think that God uses us, in each other's lives and whatnot. And so, allowing people to speak into you. And that's why I also, though, commented on, it sounds like you have a solid core, though, because it's not letting people distract you and, kind of being a people pleaser and flowing around, but also being open to kind of seeing the potential in you. So.
Well, thank you.
So Storybook Treasures, tell me about the birth of Storybook Treasures, and of course, what it is and how it can impact kids.
Yeah, so Storybook Treasures started in my kindergarten classroom when the requirements for kids changed from, kindergarten is a place to learn the alphabet and to socialize and to learn about school, to you better have them reading at this grade level by the time they leave you. So when that came about, I knew I had to change the way that I did business, because some kids are developmentally ready to learn, and this would be no problem for them. And then some aren't quite there yet. And then how do you get everybody where they need to be, and everybody, meeting, their highest potential. So, and also, I think with kindergarten, it's really hard on parents, because parents will bring their kids to you, and then, you have this criteria where they need to be. And if kids aren't quite there yet, what a horrible message to send to parents that your kid isn't good enough or your child isn't good enough. And because that's not it at all. It's the developmental piece. Everybody learns differently. Everyone, we learn to walk at a different time. We grew teeth at a different time, all of those things, but in as much as you try and pitch the developmental piece, the parents don't hear that. They just hear my child's not good enough. And I think that's the biggest challenge. And now that and then when we change the standards to make them even higher, then for those families and those children, it became, a bigger burden and a more of a challenge. So my thought was, what do I know? What talents do I have? What do I know about kids to make things better for them, so that way they can progress and be where I need them to be? And so the first thing that I notice is that any book that you read aloud to kids, in the classroom, that's the book that they want. That's the hottest commodity in your classroom. So as soon as you read that book aloud, they all want that book. They want to reread that book. They want to look at that book because they have connection, that instant connection. They've heard you read it. They've heard, how you read it. So they know the storyline. So whether they're readers or not readers, it really doesn't matter because they have that storyline and they can hear you and they can hear your voice as they're looking at the pictures. And so what I started to do first was I bought multiple copies of books that I loved and that I connected to and put them in my classroom library. And then what I noticed is that when kids went to, when they had the opportunity to do their free reading, those were the books that they gravitated to. And as they would share, whether they were a reader or not, or non-reader, they were able to share as kids in a language and in a way that I could not share with them if I wanted to, because they were picking out things and talking about things that were important to them and on their level. And so not only were they connecting with each other, which was wonderful, but they were also connecting with the book in a way that I couldn't do. And so I'm like, okay, so this is very powerful to have multiple copies in your classroom, the same book. And so then what I decided to do is I decided to put a treasure with the book. So I read the story, Owen, about a little mouse that wanted to bring his baby blanket to school. And of course, we all know you can't bring a baby blanket to kindergarten. So the story goes through with the solution being the mother cut up the baby blanket into pieces. So that way he could carry one in his pocket or carry a piece of that baby blanket with him. So I went to Walmart and I bought a baby blanket and I cut it up into little pieces and I gave them each a little piece of that baby blanket, and they lost their minds because now they felt like they were part of that story and they had that connection. And so what I did then is every time that we would be lining up or we had a little bit of time, I would pull out one of the treasure books or a treasure from one of the books that we read. And then I would just ask them, so what do you, and of course they just lose their mind. Oh my gosh, it's Owen's blanket. And so then I asked them a lot of those retelling and questions that we need for them to know for our literacy test. So, and retelling is a big deal. So, the characters and what was the problem? What was the solution? Where did the story take place? What could you have come up with a different solution? What's your idea? But they were able to remember every single detail of that book. And so I knew that again, that was another layer of building that powerful connection to books and literacy. And once I was able to do that, and bringing other books, then they would, using the same type of framework, they just fell in love with it. They fell in love with the whole process and they connected. And so when you bring something really cute and fun like that into school, sometimes it becomes a behavior nightmare in your classroom. And that's what happened in our classroom. So anytime that they saw, anything that was that color, it was like, oh my gosh, it's Owen's blanket. Someone calls that out. 10 kids go flying over to the other corner of the room trying to find the blanket. And I'm like, oh my gosh, these must go. So I sat at my computer and I wrote a letter to the parents and I'm like, hey, we're doing these books called Storybook Treasure books, and your child is going to bring home their treasure today, a little baby blanket. Keep it in a really special place or a safe place because we're going to be adding more to the collection. And by the way, your child's now an Owen expert, so make sure you ask them these questions. And so I just threw out a whole bunch of comprehension questions that were going to be great for them to review with their child, because a lot of parents don't know what questions to ask and how to ask those questions. Yep. It's like, oh, how was your day at school? Good. What'd you do? Nothing. And a story. And I always tease my kindergarten. It's like, what do you mean you did nothing? I'm like, we have done something every single minute of the day. But you have to give the words sometimes. You have to, build that up and give the words and build that understanding. So I sent this letter home. I sent the blankets home and I said, by the way, they don't come back. They stay home and they don't come back.
Yes, don't bring them back.
And so for the first time ever, as much as, as teachers, especially early educators, you try and get your parents to reach to the kids. I mean, that's the number one thing, reach to your children. This was the first time after I sent this home that I had parents reach out to me and they were like, oh my gosh, where can I get this book? My child wants to read Owen with me. Is it in the library? Is it going to be on the Scholastic order? I want to share this book with my child. And I'm like, oh my gosh, all this time that I have tried to get parents to engage with students is the first time that they're like asking me, for information about this book. I'm like, okay, so I have something special going on here. And that was my moment where I'm like, there's really something a strong connection here. And so we went.
You know what your story reminds me of real quick? Listening to you, I was like, oh my gosh, you did the McDonald's thing. Like how McDonald's geared it on the kids, got them excited about the treasures in the thing. And then suddenly they're the ones saying, Mom and Dad, I want to go to McDonald's. And now the parents are like, fine, we'll go to McDonald's. So now the kids are like, you got them excited about the book. Mm-hmm. So then now the parents are like, all right, my kids keeps talking about it, but instead of McDonald's, it's a book. Who knew?
Yeah. And that's actually what I say. I call it the Happy Meal effect. Yeah. The treasures really were the game changer, I think, because it emotionally just ties them in and they have something that they can personally connect with. So whether they have the book or not, they have an object that makes them think, oh my gosh, I remember that book. And then they remember how it made them feel and their whole experience with the book.
That's really cool.
So it really, again, I say I have a plan and God just has a bigger one. So I, at the end of the year, we do a literacy test at the end of the year. And I had every single one of my kids get a perfect score on their end of the year literacy test. Wow. And I thought for sure someone from administration was going to come down and say, what happened? Is there a glitch? Surely this is impossible, but nobody cared but me. And so I said to my husband, after that, I said, I think I have a program here. This is really powerful. Every one of my kids got a perfect score. I have a little system. I think, I can package this up in kits, and every teacher needs to have this program. And he was like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I think I want to do a nonprofit. And he's like, wait, whose money are you going to use? I'm like, our money. And he's like, you're a teacher, right? And I'm like, yes. And he's like, yeah, no, we can't afford that. We can't do a nonprofit. We're not starting a business. And so, I thought about it some more and kind of knowing, how he felt. And also just feeling something in my heart saying, I need to start this nonprofit. I came to him about 2 weeks later and I said, I really want to start this nonprofit. So I took on a job driving a limousine on the weekend, and I'm going to raise money and I'm going to start this nonprofit, Storybook Treasures. And he about lost his mind. He's like, what? Well-educated woman drives a limousine. I'm like, yours. And
the same woman who started at cosmetology school, then made a plan to finish Marymount University in 2.5 years because she's a find a way, make a way woman. So she said, you had that internal compass that said, I wanted to do this. So I'm not surprised that you went out and started driving a limo because you get this stuff done.
Yeah. Yeah. And he just, he couldn't believe it, but I did, I drove this limo, and it really was a great experience for me because I was able to, it was a private limousine. So it wasn't a limousine service. So it was the same group of people every time. And what was neat was, as I was driving them around and it was all kinds of different people, a lot of business people. So then I started asking questions and saying, hey, I'm thinking about this nonprofit. What do you think? And Tom, who I drove for, he's like, Denise, he's like, you cannot do a nonprofit. You will never make any money. You need to package this up and you need to sell it. And I said, Tom, this isn't about making money. This is about impacting kids. And so I feel like the nonprofit is the way to go. And I laugh. He's since passed, and I laugh because I'm like, he's probably looking down at me, just shaking his head and smiling, just knowing that, that he was the one who I had just this big conversation with and helped, spearhead all of the Storybook Treasures. And now just seeing the impact and where we are and how we've grown just tremendously, again, beyond, what I could have ever imagined. So
that's really cool. So what's this future of Storybook Treasures? Or where do you want it to go, and where could it go? Who can take advantage of it? Who can, use it?
Yeah, so we started out just like 6 years ago with 200 kids. So one school in Florida, one school here in Loudoun County, and in just 6 years, we have now grown to over 8,000 kids across 5 states.
Wow.
And it's all just been word of mouth. It's been teachers that have seen me post things on social media or have heard from other teachers or teachers that have used the program and have moved other places. And they're like, oh my gosh, like we want this program. How can we get this program? And so then the challenge is how do you get the money? How do you raise the funds in order to support the program? Because we know that
the schools buy it, right? Or they...
Well, it's a combination.
Yeah, tell me.
It's a combination. So with our framework, there's a lot of great organizations that give books to kids, which is wonderful. But what makes us different is that we establish that love of reading in the classroom. Teachers are experts. Teachers just can deliver a book in a way that nobody else can. And also every student has to go to school. So that way we know that we're touching every single student. Other programs that, they're wonderful, but they don't always touch every student, and it doesn't start in the classroom. We know that that's a very powerful connection. So for us, we start in the classroom. We establish that love of reading, that love of books, and that classroom connection. And then what happens is after 5 days of instruction, also included in the program is a 5-day lesson plan for the teachers that I've designed along with other teachers. And it embeds so many critical pieces, all of those elements that we need for kids to know for their assessment, but also building the background and building the vocabulary and building that connection to the book and to the author. Because once they have that author connection, then now they're connected to every book that author makes, because we go in deep there too. And then also as a gifted teacher, I finished my career as a gifted and talented teacher. It's funny, starting in vocational education and ending in gifted education. So just knowing that every child has potential, and they might not be able to read at a certain level, but they can think at that level if given the opportunity. And so a lot of our teachers are so wonderful, but they're stretched so thin, and it's hard to meet everybody's needs, and it's hard to deliver and create lessons that really can hit all of those marks. And so I felt that, again, a way for me to give back is to take my lessons that, without being boastful, I'll just say that
you can be boastful. I'd say if all of your kindergartners passed with flying colors, you can embrace that as a gift and talent you've been given. So yes. I think you should lean in there.
Yeah. So that's a gift of mine is to really create lessons that are good and hit all of those elements. So creating a lesson that allows teachers to deliver and present this book in a way that they're hitting all of those marks, that every student is engaged and every student can enjoy this, whether they're, a strong reader or not a reader at all. And so that's how we just kind of organically grew with donations from friends and family on social media. We do Facebook, little Facebook donations and things like that, and then putting things out on social media, asking for donations, and then writing grants. And then I finally got to the point where I needed help, where I realized in order for us to grow, I'm really going to have to hire somebody who knows how to really manage and write grants. So I hired Lindsay Kearney, who is our director of development now, and she has been phenomenal. She has been able to take everything that I have done in the past, organize that, manage that, and plus more, and has the time to actually make the phone calls and call the grantors to find out, are we aligned? Are we not aligned? What can we do? And if we don't get a grant, then she also has the expertise and the time to reach out and say, okay, how do we miss the mark? What can we do better? And just build those relationships, because I feel like that's so much of a nonprofit is to get the word out there. This is what we're doing, and this is how we're doing it, and building the relationships so that people from the outside are seeing, wow, yes, this is something I want to invest in. This is something I want to be a part of. And I'm a teacher, so I'm very, very scrappy. And also, with my husband saying, what money are you going to use? I'm really, I'd really try to be innovative on how we can do things to get the biggest impact. So I have my old mama minivan that I held on to. I did not sell. I held on to it. It's over 200,000 miles on it. And we pack up that mama minivan and we bring all of our supplies out to the high schools, and we do high school packing events. So we have connected with the National Honor Society and the other organizations where kids need volunteer hours. And we bring all of our materials there. I have the kids' undivided attention for about 15 minutes, where I tell them all about Storybook Treasures, all about nonprofit work, all about literacy and the importance of literacy, and then how their efforts and how their volunteer hours with packing all of our materials is going to impact the community. And what's really neat is I always tell them, I'm like, now that you volunteered, now you have a little big piece of Storybook Treasures in your heart. And so when you go out into the world and get into the future, and you're in a position where you need to give back to the community in some way, don't forget about Storybook Treasures.
Yes, girl. Yes. Plant those seeds.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And so in one of our local schools, a group of kids came up after the packing event and they said, can we start a club? We want to do a Storybook Treasure Club where we're just, working to help support you, whether it's a fundraiser or, doing little packing events or whatever we can do, but we want to do a club. What do you think? And I'm like, oh my gosh, that would be incredible. Yes. And so we now have one of our schools that has their own Storybook Treasures Club, which is really neat.
Gosh, yeah, that's amazing. Well, Denise, your story is not only inspiring for parents and teachers, but I think anyone who wants to do something, as we said in the beginning, a second act. And that can be at any stage in our life. All I mean is that, we've devoted ourselves to one thing and it just naturally, even if it seems different, you're obviously, there's a big connection, but going after that thing that's in your heart, because the whole time, your passion shines through for, kids and developing that love of reading. And so if anyone has anything on their heart that they want to jump into, I heard over and over again that you're a lifelong learner. Not only are you a teacher, but you are always willing to learn because you didn't know about grants and you researched them, you hired and got help. There's just that continual pursuit. Like I said, those are just for me, some of the things I pulled out that, wow, in addition to this amazing program, it's just some stuff that when we kind of get bogged down with, I don't know if I should try that, or it's too hard, too overwhelming. Those are some great lessons we can all take away.
Oh, well, thank you. I feel like that it's not easy. I think the most challenging thing for me and for Storybook Treasures too is asking for money, asking for funding. And I just hired another person to help us with marketing, because part of it is, how do people know that they can give to us if they don't even know we exist?
Exactly. Well, if anyone has a connection to Dolly Parton, she has her whole huge nonprofit. Perhaps they want to partner with Storybook Treasures to take theirs to the next level with your amazing program. Who knows?
I have reached out to them and I said, Storybook Treasures starts where they end, because they service, from birth to 5 years old. And then we're pre-K to third grade. And so I've reached out and I've pitched that a little bit, but I've had no response.
Well, let's keep that ball. Let's just keep throwing it out there. It may not be them. It might be someone else. But Denise, thank you so much for sharing your story. And if someone is interested in, getting in touch with you, whether it's just to learn more about you, to donate money to your amazing nonprofit, or to see about bringing your program into their school, how can they get in touch with you?
So the best way is email. So Denise@storybooktreasures.org. And of course, our website. So that's storybookTreasures.org. And then of course we're active on social media as well, and LinkedIn too.
Perfect.
So all good ways to get in touch and learn more.
Awesome. Well, Denise, as I said, thank you so much for sharing your story. I think, as I said earlier, the gifts we're given is the gifts we can give away. And, having others see the potential in you, feel like you are just pouring that back out into all the students, the ones that you've personally taught, and the hundreds, thousands, and millions that could be touched from your program, and just keep encouraging their potential. So thank you for following that nudge in your heart and to continuing to walk it out.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for letting me flesh it out, Samantha. This is your gift, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share, and hopefully we'll just reach more and more people together.
And that's a wrap for now.
Thanks for listening to Flushing It Out with Samantha Spittle. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe and rate us on iTunes. For all things Flushing, visit our website at flushingitout.com. This has been a Spitfire production.
That was the greatest thing I've ever heard.